Testing, testing.
Testing. Testing. That's much better.
Recording in progress.
It's kind of fun to do that. You know that. Good evening. Welcome to the Council of Whole meeting for the West Jordan for the City of West Jordan City Council. We will call this to order. In chambers that are present, we have Council Member Jacob, have Council Member Green, Council Member Pack, and Council Member McConaughey. It looks like we are joined by Zoom by Council Member Bloom. How are you tonight, Pamela?
I'm good. Just wiped out on this work trip, ready to be back home.
Cool. Um, just as a reminder for Councilmember Bloom, remember to maintain your presence of the meeting. You have to have your camera on. Uh, Otherwise, that's like stepping down from the dais. We only have we do have Councilmember Worthen and Councilmember Whitelock that are uh, not present. I think Councilmember Whitelock is still traveling in Europe. Councilmember Worthen had a family commitment tonight. So there are 5 of us. As a reminder, we still, and I will be clear this time, we must have 4 votes to pass any resolution, ordinance, formal action. Any procedural votes, we only have to have a simple majority. That's directed at Councilmember McConaughey. I loved what he did last time, so just never mind. That was kind of funny. It was entertaining. So, uh, with that being said, we'll move into the agenda. The first item on the agenda is a carryover because we weren't able to talk about it 2 weeks ago. We're going to have a discussion regarding at-large council seat amendments. Currently, as you know, there are 3 at-large seats, and all 3 run in a pool. The question that has been asked by at least 2 city council members, me and Council Member McConaughey, that's why this is on here, is, and that's why our illustrious city recorder is sitting in the back to help answer questions. Isn't that right, Tangi? She's here to answer questions if we have them. The question is, do we want to do what Salt Lake's, and I'm going to turn this over to Alan for a little bit of background information. They've done some research on which governments have designated at-large seats, like council seat A, council seat B, council seat C. So Alan, I'm going to turn that over to you, and then we can, for a little bit of background, and then we can have that discussion.
Thank you. So yeah, we received a request to do some research on the at-large seats. Right now, as you mentioned, the at-large seats are top 3 are elected. And the idea for discussion tonight is converting those to a designated seat, such as at-large A, B, and C. That triples the race. Right now, you've got someone who would run for seat A, someone who would run for seat B, someone who would run for seat C. There are some financial implications on that, and on the packet, you will notice there's still some discussion with the pilot program for ranked choice voting. I think that needs to be in the back of mind as you're having this discussion. The pilot program goes through 2025, where the city council will need to declare whether you want to do it or not. Currently, you've said not to go to ranked choice voting, but you're going to have to declare that on the next election as well under the pilot program. So the cost of doing the last at-large race for the 3 of you, or for 3 of the council members, was $119,000 for the primary and the general. The county, well, I probably should have Tangi answer this. So we've got Cassidy, the policy analyst, who can help answer questions. And then I've asked Tangi Sloan, as the recorder and the city election officer, any election-related questions. And she could probably go more into the cost on that real quick.
So last year, the cost, like Alan said, was $119,000. For the primary, just a primary itself was $47,734. If we did go into this A, B, and C, there would be an additional cost per seat between 1% and 5%. So we would be adding 2 elections, so each one would be an increase between 1% and 5%.
So compare that with 2 years prior, where we had 4 districts and the mayor's race. How much did that cost?
I don't have that number available with me.
Ballpark, do you remember?
It was about, I'm going to say, 110,000 in that ballpark, around there, between 110 and 120.
So if we went to a 3-slot race instead of a pool, the costs aren't going to be that
Much more than what we paid for the election before.
Okay.
Yeah. And then please keep in mind too, we are going to have a new county clerk, which could include a new interlocal agreement and contract. And then keep in mind too, ranked choice voting, they have already told us that there will be a increase in cost for that as well. They didn't calculate that correctly in the last election.
So, Chair, that's information from the elections office for the city. So what we've got on the screen here is the pros and cons as we've gone through that as staff. The left area, the left side of this half of your screen is the multi-winner. It's the way we currently do the at-large elections. The right half of this screen is the designated plurality where we designate a seat A, B, and C. And those kind of just show the pros and cons. And again, I'll just kind of reiterate, just keep in mind the ranked choice voting just needs to kind of be in the back of your mind. That is highlighted in the red text on the left bottom of the screen, just so you've got that in mind as you're discussing. And so we're here to answer any questions as you have the dialogue.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is what Salt Lake County Council does. Ogden City does this. Are there any other jurisdictions that do the designated city or designated
This
slot?
Salt Lake County, I think you mentioned, and
So
Ogden.
I'm going to ask Tangi this question.
Copperton actually does it as well.
Oh, do they? Here's a question for you. If we are forced, I'm going to say forced, if we are required, because the legislature decides to do that, and we have, and we're forced to do ranked choice voting with the pool that we have, how does, what do you see as the impacts to you and your office, and is that worse than going to 3 slots?
I don't think either way. I think either way, it's going to be a challenge. Other than the only problem that I see is voter confusion. You know, you have, so say we have 6 people running for the way we have it now, and you have to tell them that they have to choose. It gets confusing. If we have them in an A, B, or C, it helps minimize the confusion, I think. But then they still have to vote for, so many.
But it distributes the candidates over 3
Exactly.
separate races, so it makes it simpler to understand.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Chair Green, in 2018, the election cost $145,000, and in 2020, it cost $149,000.
That's a little off.
Do you mean 17 and 19?
Say it again.
We don't, you're talking fiscal year.
Fiscal year, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, we don't have even year. Never mind.
So can I just make an editorial comment? You scare me that you can get that information that quick. So thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Do we know how many of these other cities that do this do them all in the same year versus having it staggered? For example, Salt Lake County staggers the at-large over different elections. So at any given year, I think only 1 at-large seat is up. Some of them might have 2 at-large seats up in a given year and 1 in another year.
Copperton does it that same way. They're staggered.
The county council, the at-large seats are a 6-year election, whereas
Right.
the districts are 4 years. So that throws it into a different cycle too.
And that way they have 1 every 2 years, and that way you're up
Yeah.
every 6 years. Yeah. I don't think that's allowed for city councils to do that
I'd have to look into
in
that.
state law to make a term other than 4 years.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
I think state law has it specific to 4 years. So it'd be cool if we were like Salt Lake County, could just make up the rules as we go along.
Anna Marie, is that they do to you and they make up the rules as they go? Never mind. Yeah, I know.
Councilmember Jacob is correct. It is in state law that city council members have 4-year terms.
See, I would prefer if it was staggered. So if we do go down this road, we like to do this. I would prefer it maybe going to 2 at large, and because it has to be 4 years, 2 at large, 5 districts, and do it where you have at large A and district 1, 2, and 3, and at large B and district 4, 5, and mayor or something as the as the elections every go around. That would be my preference. Just so you don't have so you don't have people wanting to run and cherry picking who to run against. Yeah, I mean, like right now, if the three, and please take this as totally an example, not as an editorial comment on the effectiveness or the suitedness of the three at-large candidates here, or three at-large council members. But if we had Kelvin, Kayleen, and Pamela running for re-election all at the same time in separated seats, somebody might look at it and go, oh, I think Kelvin is the weakest candidate. So everybody files in slot C and nobody files in A and B. I don't know how somebody would make that decision or that determination for themselves, but anyway, it kind of, yeah, it would kind of defeat the purpose. But if you have only one up every election, then it makes it easier. Anyway.
May I offer my concern? Exactly what Councilmember Jacob said. That is my biggest concern, is people cherry picking which A, B, or C.
Which
to run
really,
in.
if there is one that's perceived as weaker, that would be lower in a limited voting multi-winner format anyway, correct? Because I've tried to run the scenario of this. I've talked to various city council members and tried to do some research, and it seems like with any action that we take, there's basically an equal and opposite reaction. There's a pro and a con, and in a way, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but then you try to fix it, and then it inherently causes another issue. For instance, let's say that we're in favor of having the staggered voting, but then that still puts the stagger on certain districts, and so you have to make a decision. But let's say in our current format, if you are serving in a district and you want to run for, let's say, mayor, you take the risk of doing that because then you're not going to be able to run for your seat. If you're an at-large member, well, then it's a no-lose situation if you're trying to run for a different office in the city. So I see so many different pros and cons. I appreciate the PowerPoint slide. It basically encompasses everything that I, have been mulling over in my head. But if you're not in favor of a 5-district city election, well, then that throws another wrench in the works for that idea. So you can be half in favor of one idea and half not, and it still doesn't work out. So the main, as I've been trying to think about this in preparation for the meeting, the main idea came to mind of, yes, the cherry picking idea of, it almost seems like a high school student body election. Oh, that guy's too popular, so I'm going to run for vice president instead of student body president. And, well, I really don't care if I'm secretary. I just want to be an SBO. And so you're kind of looking at who might be the most vulnerable, but in a way that would already come up in a limited voting multi-winner too. So it is an interesting situation on whether you make it ABC or have everyone together. I don't necessarily see an inherent clear advantage to changing. And to me, if there's not an inherent clear advantage to changing, why change? It just it causes a lot of voter frustration, re-education. Is there a clear reason to change?
Councilmember Bloom, I heard you try to chime in. We'll go with you that first, and then Councilmember McConaughey.
I'm reading over this. I'm like Councilmember Pack. If there's not a clear indication of needing to change, I guess I'm not understanding why we would need to change, because I don't see a really clear positive benefit in changing to ABC. Like the concerns before, waiting to the last minute to file to see which one to file under. That just seems like it's just making everybody's job a bit harder. So I'm definitely not in favor of changing to ABC or 1, 2, 3.
Chris.
Boy, and we've only got, 55 minutes? There's a lot to say on this one. First of all, the way we're set up right now, I feel it treats the at-large seats different from the district seats. There were comments made about cherry picking who you run against, and I really don't see the problem with that. I don't see that as being a detriment. There could also be people that you want to work well with. Having the setup that we do right now could discourage people from running, because they could say, well, Councilmember A and Councilmember B are fantastic council members. If I were to run, I would just be taking votes away from them. And there may be another council member that I'm not as fond of. Let's just say Councilmember H. Maybe I have a lot of frustration with what Councilmember H has done, and I would really like to see them out of office. I'm going with H because there's nobody on that council with the last name of H, at least not currently. But if I'm very frustrated with that
Oh, I
particular
know that
council member, then I can say I'm going to run against that particular person. The other thing is when you're looking at the district elections, you have one race for one seat. Here you have multiple people all in one race, but it's 3 separate seats. And it could potentially, I don't want to say inspire, but it could potentially lead to collusion between those who are running, saying, you know what, we're going to run as a group. Or maybe 2 or 3 people run together, they're doing everything together, they could do their advertisements together, and then make it more difficult for somebody else to run against them. You don't have that in the district seats right now. It's you pick a seat, you run for that seat. So I would like to see all the seats treated equally. It's a separate conversation about like the staggering of the seats. It's also a separate conversation about the ranked choice. But I don't like how it's being done right now because it's different from the district seats. And there's also a little bit of voter confusion with this, it seems, as well, because every time you look at the election results from those at-large races, you'll see a number of people have not submitted as many votes as they could have, because you can vote for 3 in that race, but you'll see people that only vote for 1. You don't see the same number of votes cast for that, if not the same number, but if you're to look, okay, how many votes do we have in race 1, race 2, race 3, race 4, compared to the number of votes in the at-large, I guess they're on off cycle, so you don't really have that direct comparison, do you? But you do when it was against the mayors. Yes, you do. You didn't see 3 times the number of votes in the at-large that you did in the mayor's votes. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So personally, it comes down to that fairness, treating all seats equally. In the past, we have also had folks. Well, never mind. I'll drop that one. Treating all seats are treated equally. 1 race, 1 seat, not 1 race where we take the top 3 winners. And it also gives you the ability to say who you want to run against and to break yourself apart from the group. When you're looking at the at-large, it's going to be very different for me if I'm looking and saying, okay, well, who's running for the at-large seats? And if we have 8 candidates, that's a lot to go through. Even if we just have 2 candidates for each seat, we have 6. How many people are going to really do their homework well? They'll just find their top 3. Okay, I'll run with that. Versus if you have each seat designated, okay, I'm making a comparison between 2, I can see what I'd like. I think it better helps the voters draw distinctions between the candidates. And I think it's more reflective of what's come to be expected in other races where it's 1 race, 1 seat. So that's why I would prefer to move to the numbering or lettering or just the individual designation of the seats.
See, and I'm with you. Here's a couple of other reasons. One, I agree with you. We've routinely on this council rejected ranked choice voting, yet our council at large races is as close to ranked choice voting as you can get without having ranked choice voting, because you have to pick for the top 3. We're just not ranking 1 through 6. We're picking the top 3. Well, we're semi-ranked choice voting, yet we vote against ranked choice voting, but we continue to say, well, 3 at-large council is okay. But let me just tell you, from a perspective of somebody who ran in this past race, that helps me lean towards this particular proposal. You can't focus on the issues. And here's why. Let's say candidate H takes a stance and makes a statement about policy that is completely untrue or is not founded in fact. and you're running in this pooled race, and you go to council member, you get, and you make it, council member H stance on policy is wrong. What's council member H going to do being called out for that policy discrepancy? Oh, council member Green personally attacked me. Now council member H is out campaigning, and somebody says, you get a vote for 3, and council member H says, vote for council members Y and Z along with me because council member Green was mean to me. I don't want you to vote for them. And so what you've got now is you've got this, what Chris, you called collusion, I'm going to call alliances, that you can't talk about issues because you're afraid that you're going to make the other opponent mad. And when you make that, and I will just tell you, this happened in this last election. Board of Canvassers meeting for the primary, wasn't the final election. Board of Canvass meeting for the primary. There was one of the candidates that I was talking to, and he didn't get a lot of votes, but he got a few. And I was just talking to him, telling him thanks for running in the race. And the comment he made to me, and this is part of the reason why I don't like this, it helped me, but he said, when I was out campaigning and people asked who I should vote for besides me because I was campaigning, I told them to vote for you and another candidate because you were nice to me. The rest of the candidates weren't as nice to me, so that's how and so I had, because I was nice to the guy and talked to him, I had a person who told 1,500 people, whatever he campaigned for, and people asked him who to vote for, he told them to vote for me, and I will say it, he told them to vote for me and Pamela. And so how does that skew the collusion in an election? Because now you're winning votes because you're nice to the other candidate.
That's still going to happen, though. That's not that different,
Yeah.
because it'll still happen if you got 3 different races. You still get to vote
Yeah.
3 different times.
Right.
So, I mean, people ask me all the time, who should I vote for Congress, county mayor, and president? I give them 3 names. Maybe it was because somebody was nice to me. Maybe it's because I like their policy. Maybe it's for who knows, whatever reason. I don't think that really changes per se. I mean, it changes in how you count it, but I don't think the process of campaigning or the process of people working together really changes that much. For example, when Councilmember H actually ran, with Mayor candidate R, and they went around and did all the events together, and they put up their signs next to each other and knocked on the same doors to get permission of the same properties to put their signs up, and it was a ticket, and it was 2 different races. It was a mayor and a council member. Now, it was an at-large council member, and so it was it wasn't a single vote, but those 2 races were separate, and yet they were going around and they were doing exactly what you just said. If you're going to vote for me as a council member, vote for him for mayor. If you're going to vote for him for mayor, vote for him for council member. And that's the way it went. And
But if the policy, the reason why you'd vote for the other seat may be, I don't like his policy, but the likelihood is that if you were campaigning, you're going to less likely to call somebody out and not in your race. It's your opponent that you're going to address the issues, not the other 2 candidates. That's where I'm coming from.
I don't see it changing too drastically if we go with the ABC. I came in obviously against 3 incumbents, and even if it was an A, B, and C, I don't see some of the dialogue in our public meetings changing with, let's say, the 3 incumbents who want to stay in office. I don't see it drastically changing how people campaign, except it's just going to cost the city more money and we're going to have to educate people. I just don't see there's enough an argument in my head to make a case for changing everything. And that's coming from somebody who went against 3 incumbents.
Well, the other concern I have is if the city goes, if the state requires us to go to ranked choice voting and we get, let's just type, we had this last year. We had, the initial filing was 10 candidates, Tangi, and then 2 dropped.
Who
And so,
dropped out?
and so we had 8 people. We would have had 8 people running for 3 slots. And I'm going to tell you, look what happened to Sandy. Look what happened to Draper. Draper can't stand ranked choice voting, based on the last race. Draper or Sandy City, that ranked choice voting, because they had 1 seat and 11 candidates, was an utter mess. And I want to try to avoid that. I think if we had ranked choice voting and we had 3 separate seats, then you're only ranking and you probably only have 3 or 4 people max running for each seat, and it's less confusing. If we have three seats and you get a vote for, and you have to rank top 8, 9, 10, campaign is just going to be messy. And I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a mess, but that's me.
Thank you. If I may, Councilmember Bloom, question for you, please, and then one for Councilmember McConaughey. Do you feel, since Councilmember Green mentioned his experience in the recent campaign, do you feel, and I know it's hard to conjecture, but Councilmember Bloom, do you feel that it would have changed how you campaigned? And
No.
against whom, if you had to choose an A, B, or C from the last?
No,
last
it would not have changed at all how I campaigned. Not at all.
Thank you. And then for Councilmember McConaughey, thank you. The reason I love dialogue like this is you can see issues from different perspectives and thoughts that you haven't considered before. Councilmember McConaughey, you were mentioning that if you have the current type of voting in the general election, it's down to 6 candidates, and you have 6 to vet. But if it were A, B, and C, you'd still have 6 to vet. Or is it that you're saying when you have 6 in one race, someone might just fill out 1 or maybe 2, whereas if you had 3 different races, you're vetting the same amount of candidates, but you're understanding it's 3 separate races, so you're probably going to fill in a vote for all 3 more than you would if it was just 1 race? And not that we can, empirically state that. I'm just curious about your hypothesis.
So for me, while Councilmember Bloom stated that she wouldn't have changed anything in campaigning, for me as a voter, I wasn't running in that race, but I was voting in that race. It would have changed the way that I evaluated the candidates, because the way I looked at it was, okay, which 3 people would I like to work with most? Who do I think I can get along with best? I don't necessarily need to agree with them, but I need to be able to talk and discuss and see different points of view. And that's what I was looking for with the group. If it was more of a 1 race, 1 seat, and I'm comparing 2 people against each other, I could see what one person thinks on an issue compared to what the other person thinks on an issue. You can't really do that when you have 6. It's like, I'm trying to think of what a good comparison would be, but almost instead of like a man-to-man race, it's just sort of a fun run, and we're just seeing who can happily get across the finish line. Let's just all have fun. But in an actual competition of skill, there are different things being measured, being evaluated. And the way I do my evaluation as a voter would be different if it's 2 people compared side by side, or even 3 people for one particular seat. I know who I'm looking at. But with 3 seats, all in 1 race, I'm not thinking about it differently, and I'm voting differently in this than I would in the race for mayor, than I would in the race for the district council seats. And because it's very different, I don't think it's as reflective of the will of the people. I don't think the people can as easily say through their vote what they're looking for. I did also feel like during the campaign, people avoided topics that were controversial, so you couldn't really find anything. You did hear things where some of the candidates, non-incumbents, were attacking the council as a whole, saying things like, "Oh, they're disconnected," or "They're out of touch with the public." And they weren't saying who specifically was it. There were some saying, "Oh, well, they don't show up." Some of the council don't show up, and they weren't being clear as to, well, who was it? And trying to attract votes by degrading the rest of the council. But that degradation wasn't really a policy statement. I want to see policy statements. I want to see legislative thought process, and I didn't see that.
Seeing,
And let me back up, because it wasn't just that last race. I've seen this for a number of years, and it's the same thing. It's I feel like there is a little bit of policy discussion because we do have the mayoral race the same time with those, but it's very blind and it's very difficult to compare candidates head to head because it's just kind of a group thing and it's not one race, one seat.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
well, and,
Yes,
and,
thank you.
and I would agree with Councilmember McConaughey. If I were running against one opponent, two opponents, and it's very easy to then establish policy, or you can ask them, what's your stance on this particular piece of policy? In a group race that we had, that was very difficult. And it's very difficult, as Councilmember McConaughey said, I think it's very difficult to talk about the tough issues. And honestly, I think that the three at large is more of a popularity contest, like a high school race, more than it is about policy and public. But that's just me. I would have run my campaign differently.
At the end of the day, regardless of which way it goes, the person with the best campaign and the best support is going to win, regardless of how it's set up. And I don't think it's going to make any detrimental difference if it's set up as AB or how it currently is. I would not have changed my campaign. I had my schedule set up, everything was set, and that would not have changed in any way if it was set up in an AB or 1, 2, 3.
But when you look at what Councilmember McConaughey just said, that I'm going to tell you, 8 of us didn't run on the tough issues. You talk about certain things, but at the end of the day, there's lots of generics and no specifics, and I think Chris is right. But the
That's
one
city
thing
campaigns regardless.
well, and that may be all campaigns, but the one thing that I think would bear out is, and I think the numbers bear this out. The number of people who voted in the general election this last year, if you looked at that with the total number and then the total for each candidate, no one got the full. There were lots of people who voted for one candidate, lots of people who voted for 2, and lots of people who did not vote for 3. And I think that bears out with the numbers, doesn't it, Tangi?
Yes, it does. And I want to point out too, you're going to have this same situation with the way we're doing it now. When we put it on the ballot, we say vote for 3. We do ranked choice voting, and we tell them, vote for
8.
8. But even currently now, we have issues with people just voting for 3. So there's going to be confusion, I think, either way. It's all about educating the public.
Well, I don't think between vote for 3. I mean, ranked choice voting is a separate conversation.
It is, but
Vote for 3 or vote for A, B, and C. Vote for 3 in 3 separate races.
vote for 1 in 3 separate races.
Well, right, or 3 in 3 races divided out equals 1 per race. Yes. I don't think that matters as much as, well, what if it's ranked choice voting? Personally, if we have A, B, and C, I like ranked choice voting a whole lot better for the at-large race. I've said before that I like it for district races, but not for at-large, not for multiple winner seats. I think it's
I agree
messy.
with you that I agree with you there that if we have to do ranked choice voting, it needs to be a multiple
And
seat.
whether we
because I
have to
agree
or
with
whether we choose to, in a future council or whatever reason, I like it a lot better as ABC, as one vote, you know, rank these four against each other for who's your first choice, not who's your first and second choice, right? So as far as that's concerned, that's how I feel about that. But I don't, I really don't think it changes much. I'd be willing to try it. I mean, if we wanted to vote on this and say, yeah, in 2025, we're going to give this a try and we're going to run, you know, 3 different seats and there you go. I would probably want to specify in that conversation that if all 3 incumbents run for reelection, they have to run for separate seats. I don't know if you can do that or not, but in order to keep 3 incumbents in 3 races, you know.
So that you don't have 2 incumbents trying to knock one
Right,
knock
exactly.
one of each other out.
Yeah, and then you have 1 seat with no incumbents, and everybody who's new jumps into that race.
I think you could solve that by, if we did something like that, we designate the seats now, and the council, of course, and then,
Right. Yeah. Then you
but
can
then,
do that now.
but then if
They
they
could still
file, they
choose.
could still file in another race. But
True, because there's no residency required. And yeah, that
Yeah.
would that's.
but I understand. I understand your concern there.
Sure. The more I think about it as we're talking through this out loud, I think the biggest reason I would like to see the seats broken out individually is because it gives the voters recourse to hold their elected officials responsible and accountable. If there's somebody in an at-large seat, we'll say if there's a council member H who's doing things that they don't approve of, they have an opportunity to actively try to find somebody else to represent them. When all of the at-large are grouped together in one race for multiple seats, it's not possible for a voter to try and impact the one elected official that they may want to impact. Having those races all lumped together does not provide the voters with the recourse or the accountability that they demand of their elected officials. That's the biggest thing in my mind why I think we should make the change.
So I think there's some digging into the legality of what we can do as far as designating the 3 current council members as A, B, and C, and then telling a current council member that you can't run in a different A, B, and C race. I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, I don't know if you
Well, I don't know that we'd need to be able to do that because why not? I mean, they might all be assigned seats now, but if 2 or all 3 want to go for 1 seat,
Knock yourself
Why not?
out and see
Yeah.
what happens.
if you weren't an incumbent, you could do that.
Yeah. Well, and if you're somebody who's out there thinking about running against an incumbent, that makes your job a lot easier.
Yeah.
You now got 1 or 2 seats that don't have an incumbent. You stuck all the incumbents in 1 races because that's what they decided to do.
Well, and I have to tell you, it seems to me, you know, and we've seen this. Salt Lake County's done this for how many years now? They've never had 2 incumbents file for the same at-large race. And my question is, if I'm an incumbent, for example, why would I put myself at risk to take on another incumbent? You know, I'm not going to put personally, I'm not going to put myself at that kind of a risk to go head to head with a.
Unless there was a council member, you know, H that you really wanted to make sure didn't. Never mind.
Yeah, but I think,
Hypothetical.
but
H stands for
hypothetically, I think you could.
hypothetical.
Hypothetically, I think you could find somebody else to run against that council member, and you'd still run in your own race. But I don't know.
Is that the colluding that we talked about before?
Yeah,
Never
that's the
mind.
collusion that could happen under that kind of race. Yeah, that's a legal collusion.
So there were 3 elements to tonight's conversation. Did we hit all of them, or is there more? Because there was one other item I want to bring up related to voting.
Go ahead.
All right. So the other thing, if we are going to be making any modifications, also, where are we going with this? Were there 4 in favor of moving forward, or where
I
we're
don't
missing
think
too.
I don't think we've decided.
Yeah.
We can ask that question here in a second.
If we do make changes, one of the things that I would also like to change, this is where I see at-large seats are also being treated differently than district seats. With at-large seats, with any of our seats, code requires that you live in the area that you represent for at least a year prior to the election. So if somebody is in one district and then at the end of the term moves to another district, they would be prohibited from running for that district for a year. However, if you are at large, you could no issue at all. I would like to see us remove that 1 year requirement and perhaps change it to 1 year in the city if we have it at all.
That's a state law. You have to live in the district that you're gonna run in.
Well, yeah, but you don't have to live in the district that you're running in for a year. I think that's city ordinance. What,
No, I think it's state law. I know it's state law for state offices. You have to live in your district for a year before you take office. I'm pretty sure that applies to anything that's districted.
I'll look at it, but I think you're right.
Interesting.
Give me a second, I'll look.
but I mean, Councilmember McConaughey's got a good point. The at-large races have, you can live anywhere in the city, but if
Yeah.
you live in a district and then you move,
If you
And you
lived in
want-
the city for 43 years, but you moved from District 1 over to District 2,
You can't run for District 2, but you could run at large because you are still in the at large.
different election cycle.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, and that makes sense, as you're saying,
There's no
you
waiting
could
period.
say, oh, I'm a resident of Utah, but moved from one district to another, that doesn't make you eligible to run in that new district,
Right.
just because you've lived in Utah, kind of like, I see what you mean, yeah.
Now, that may be a good question for our legal staff to help answer. So let me just go down the road. Go ahead, Council Office Director Anderson.
No, I think you're headed where I was just suggesting, because I count 3 and
Well,
2
I
at this
was,
point.
I,
but
I
I'll
was
let
just
you
gonna,
handle
I
it.
was just gonna go down the list to see if this is something that we want to explore further and put into, look at modifications of the code. I'm just gonna go down each person so that we have, because we could actually vote on this, but we'll just go down each person. So, Councilmember McConaughey, what we're talking about is, do we want to look at this further and expend the, I see Rob with his light on before I do that.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Back to the comment of designating the districts. I think you could designate, council member X as A, B, and C. The state law is pretty liberal in letting you decide how you set this up. But I'd want to take a look at whether or not you could preclude one existing at-large council member from choosing to run in another district. That kind of smacks to me as unfair.
Yeah.
But before I gave a definitive answer, I'd want to look at the state code.
I was just throw that out as a hypothetical.
Yeah, but no, I think.
I don't know if we need to or not. I mean,
Yeah.
whichever.
And before going to that, while we're still on tangents, for the benefit of legal, the portion of state code that I was looking at is 20A-9-203. An individual may become a candidate for any municipal office if you go to number 2A. For the purposes of determining whether an individual meets the residency requirement in the next one down. Where did it go? Nope, there it is. Sorry. 1B1. The individual has resided within the municipality in which the individual seeks to hold elective office for the 12 consecutive months immediately before the date of the election. It says municipality,
Can
it
you do
doesn't
that
say
code one more time?
district.
Do that section.
20A-9-203. It's a section called Declarations of Candidacy Municipal General Elections. Section 1, an individual may become a candidate for any municipal office if A, they're a registered voter, B1, they've resided within the municipality for 12 consecutive months, B2, it was incorporated.
And then, that's
Yeah.
correct. And then 2B only
2B.
requires they live in the district, but it doesn't give a time period.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go down the row and, see what you want. Change it, yes or no, Chris? Yes. Okay, Councilmember McConaughey was a
Aye.
yes. Councilmember Pack.
Well, since we're not voting tonight and we're going to have to revisit this with ranked choice voting and other issues, it seems like this is inherently linked into it. We're probably going to have to look at this issue when we're looking with others anyway. So I'm happy to look at it. As we've said, it's a big tangled web of, oh, well, if we do ranked choice this, or if we do designated seat that. So I'm happy to continue the conversation because I appreciate the time and effort and all the ideas on both sides where still, unless there's an inherent clear yes that that we need to change it, I'm hesitant, but I don't want that to seem like I'm unwilling to have the conversation since we're going to be discussing other areas of voting anyway. Thank you.
I'm a yes. Councilmember Jacob?
I'm a willing to look at it further as well. I don't think it's as tied up. It's not tied up in ranked choice voting unless we want it to be. It's its own issue, and it can be its own issue independent of any other issue. So I'm willing to continue to look at it. It's got its pros and cons, and when the resolution comes, I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to vote for the resolution, but I'm willing to look at
Okay.
I'm willing to look at it further.
Councilmember Bloom?
I'm the same boat. I'll look at it further. But yeah, definitely no resolution today, of course.
Right. So, Council Office Anderson, since you're making notes in PrimeGo for the first time ever. By the way, if you didn't know, Alan he's trying to multitask on 4 different computers right now with Zoom and PrimeGov, and it's going to be fun to watch the rest of the meeting. For your notes, what we're going to do is we're going to say based on basically 5 people saying yes, we're going to proceed so that we can do that research analysis, spending the staff time that we need to work on this further. Does that make sense?
Yep, I've got that noted, and I will work with legal to answer some of the legal questions. I'll work with Ms. Sloan on election things, and then we will schedule a time when we're ready to bring it back to you.
And from my perspective, just based on hearing the discussions, I think there's a couple of issues here. One is the one that Councilmember McConaughey talks about with the residency requirement. I think that one, there's that one, and there's the seats A, B, and C. And so there's kind of 2 issues that if we're looking at the election code, if we want to adopt. And so we'll just look at it that way, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yep, one, the other, both, none, whatever. So, but I think that will help with the direction with the council and the office, don't you, with you and Rob and everybody else. That will help. Now we know we can expend some more council time on it, or some more staff time. Does that help, Rob?
It does. What I plan to do is meet with Al and we'll put together a list of what we think the questions are.
Okay,
And then we'll shoot that to the council to make sure we're not missing something.
that works for me. Moving on, we now have 22 minutes to talk about 21 and a half, sorry. We'll talk about the general plan process. Is that correct, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. So the general plan has been introduced to the Planning Commission. The way the state code defines this is, as you all know, we had a citizens committee that have been working for coming up on 2 years on helping staff come up with the general plan. Ms. Hanson, the policy analyst in the council office, has been the chief author, working with the community development staff to compile it. They are meeting right now the Planning Commission is meeting right now going over. It's probably going to take them 3 or 4 meetings to digest it. It's currently 197 pages and 12 chapters. What we want to prepare for with the council is once the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to you, how would you like to go about the general plan? So as I mentioned, there's 12 chapters. These are the 12 chapters that are currently in the book, not necessarily in order, other than the introduction will be first. The Community Development Department, the Planning Commission, the last meeting, they reviewed 4 chapters. Some of the chapters are a little more complex, like land use. Others are fairly simple. So the questions I have for you, before I get to the questions I have for you, at this pace, by the time they digest the chapters, make recommendations, get it compiled, have a public hearing, and then bring that document to you, I'm anticipating late November, most likely December before it comes to you. And it will probably take, depending on how many chapters you want to go through, it'll help us in this office schedule your committee of the whole meetings, how much time you want to dedicate to it, those type of things. So these are kind of the questions. Do you want to review multiple chapters during committee of the whole? Maybe take a little bit longer on the more complex chapters. Maybe do complex chapters one at a time. Do you want to schedule additional committee of the whole meetings? If it takes you 3 or 4 work session meetings, that would be 2 months of meetings that the work session would pretty much be tied up with the general plan. And the last one is just, like I mentioned, we expect to begin this process of bringing it to you sometime in December of this year. So that's the dialogue that we're looking is just, we kind of plan when the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to you. How do you want us to plan your review of the general plan?
Well, and we also need to put in here, I think there's another question we need to ask is how many public hearings do we want? Do we want one? Do we want multiple? We've already sponsored two town halls, but the question is, do we want to sponsor some other more than the one public hearing that we're required to?
So I'm just seeking some direction from the council. It's a little premature, maybe, but I think having it planned ahead will help us schedule other things that will come. We have the water master plan, the sewer master plan. We have several items that are going to have to come to you shortly.
Well, and I think we do this, it'll help leadership, help plan out meetings too, so it'll help you and it'll help everybody, so. Councilmember Pack, I see your light on, so go for it.
Great, thank you. Yes, I'm glad that we were able to have the public open houses. That was wonderful. Thank you for preparing all of that information. I think it's always great when you can get in front of everyone so that we can all hear what everyone has to say. And certainly we want to have public hearings. I'd be hesitant to try to smack of any micromanagement if this wonderful committee has invested 2 years of research. I'd want to ensure that the tenor of our meeting isn't to micromanage, but rather to gain more information and get everybody on the same page of understanding to move forward. So I'd be more in favor of not going necessarily page by page and taking months and months of our committee of the whole time, but more vetting and verifying versus micromanaging.
But even vetting and verifying is gonna take 12 chapters, 197 pages, gonna take more than an hour, so.
Yeah, oh yes, definitely. It's just when it's been mentioned, gosh, do we want to do this for a few months? I'd probably say, juggling everything else that we have to juggle, we wouldn't want to just juggle that one ball for 3 months.
Councilmember McConaughey, your thoughts?
Boy, open meeting, being recorded, trying to figure out how to articulate myself without putting my foot in my mouth. I miss the days when we would come to council meeting having done our homework in advance, having already gone through all the information that was there. I think this would be a really good opportunity for us to take all these various chapters that have been reviewed and come together with our comments and maybe our top 10 to 15 list of pain points or points that we want to see better fleshed out, and try to work from that approach rather than trying to dedicate like one meeting to each chapter or something like that, where somebody comes up and reads what's provided into the packet to us because nobody did it in advance. We start and just kind of put together a list one night saying, I want to talk about these 12 things, and that overlaps with Councilmember Jacob who wants to hit these 7. I think we could do it pretty quick if we do our homework in advance rather than having everything fully read to us here. Still be as public and transparent as possible. Make sure all the information that we're getting is made available to the public. But I'd like to go that approach. I think it'd be a lot more efficient. Additionally, when you ask about the public hearings, when we have, I think the town halls are going to be better at soliciting feedback than the traditional public hearing that's noticed in the paper. People come here. We really don't get that much out of this. I think we'll see more from continued online engagement than trying to do additional formal public hearings. I would encourage maybe from a less formal approach if we wanted, if council leadership felt it would be helpful to have a separate place for citizen comments regarding the regarding these updates on the agenda. So we have directed public comments, and then we have open public comments. It could serve a similar purpose without going through the expense and the hoops of formal noticing. Hopefully that came out making some sense.
That actually did make some sense. Councilmember Jacob. I'm just going down the road.
I'm willing to leave this to agendizing and stuff to the discretion of leadership. I'll discuss whatever you'd like to discuss when you decide to put it in front of me. So
Okay.
I welcome leadership to lead.
Councilmember Bloom.
I like Councilmember McConaughey's approach. Let's work smarter, not harder. And I like being able to, do our homework and come to the table with a handful of items we want to discuss on it and move through that way.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember McConaughey, Councilmember Anderson, or Council Director Anderson. That's way too old. I like the idea, and it sounds like there's about 4 of us, and I don't know about Councilmember Pack, but here's what I propose and kind of solidify is, based on what I've heard, is that we'll set up. Are you willing to do it on do you want to do it on a council night, or do you want to do it on another night separate from council?
Preferably council. I mean, this is there aren't that many levers the council has, and to do it on an off council night where it becomes difficult or prohibitive from other council members to be there, I would prefer that we make an effort to have it within a regular council meeting.
Okay, so
or
Yeah,
committee of
that
the
too.
whole meeting part on that same council night.
right, cool. That's what I meant, was committee of the whole. So
I'd rather keep it on council nights, council agendas.
okay, so what I'm hearing is that we want to keep it on council meeting. What I'm also hearing is that what we want to do is have everybody do their homework, and that we get ready for the meet. And here's my suggestion: is if we have comments, if we can do them before the meeting, get them to the council office, then council staff could say, Councilmember McConaughey had this concern, and we put a matrix together, and we narrow, so we're not talking about everybody's concerns. We actually consolidate that so we see what the concerns are, and get it down to the actual concerns we really need to talk about.
I think I agree for the most part. The one part where I would divert an opinion a little bit, sometimes it's helpful for me when we have the larger conversation as a group to say why this is one of my concerns, because Councilmember Jacob has brought up things that I didn't think about. And if there's not overlap because I had a blind spot, but he hit it dead on, I want to make sure that his idea or his perspective doesn't get washed out because I wasn't bright enough to think of it up front.
But if
we do have those all and we submit it, and maybe he's got everything kind of carried out, like here's columns of what each council member saw, then we take 3 minutes to each talk through, here's my list, here's what I have. And then we go through as a group, okay, now that we've heard why everybody says each one of these, let's decide as a group, rather than council leadership trying to read our minds and guess what's out
And
there.
I
That would be
think
my
we're I think we're on the same path. Is that if we just have a good chart that said, here's my comments for chapter 1, 2, 3, 12, and then we put McConaughey, Green, Pack across the matrix this way, we can fill that in and we can see what the comments are, and then we're all on the, would that work? And then, and then when we come, we have that chart in front of us, and then you're right, we just go
We
through.
select from that chart, okay, here's the things that
We
we're
can-
going to
We
hit
can
on.
start with chapter one and say, here's everybody's comments, what do we, and just move down the list or across the list, whatever works, and do that. Would that work for you?
Yeah.
Will that work for you?
Yes, thank you. This is what I've actually been a proponent of for years, is anything that can be disseminated to the public and to council members in advance so that we can do our homework. It saves us time in meetings. Historically, I've been told, well, that doesn't pass muster of public exposure, transparency, scrutiny. So, so evidently there are some feelings that some of these presentations need to be in the committee of the whole or city council meeting. But yes, anything that we can do ahead of time, that's great, and definitely agreed on perspective. I know when I was on the general plan committee, it was supposed to be 1 year and it ended up being 3 years. And I really did like coming to the meetings and hearing what other people had to say, whether I was just serving on a subcommittee or I was chairing a subcommittee. I remember chairing some subcommittees and coming to city council meetings and going to other meetings where I could get better perspective. So a balance of both. Yes, let's definitely vet it and talk about it, but not micromanage it.
Cool. Councilmember Jacob, you good with that kind of a process? Councilmember Bloom, are you good with that kind of a process?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Council Director Anderson.
If I could throw out one other thing. Once we do have the list of items that we'd like to refine, I would very much be interested in having some from that general plan committee here to help us understand their thought process so that they're engaged. I don't want it to. We've seen in past meetings where there have been items that have come before the city council that have gone incredibly quick. And it almost looks like the council is not reading, not really paying attention to what's going on, and things are just flying through. But it's because of staff, or in this case, the general plan committee, who's put in all the work. I want to make sure that they're recognized, and where we do have questions, we can engage with them, and there's not a wall between the council and the general plan committee.
Based on that comment, I would recommend that when we set this meeting up on a council meeting in December, or, in December or January, that we invite the general, at least the chair of the general plan committee and as many other members of the general plan committee that they want, that if we're talking and we have a question, they can answer it. Do you think that'll work, Alan?
Yes, we're already planning on that.
Okay.
The one thing real quick that may be helpful, because you can actually print this out in PrimeGov. So if you'll bear with me for like 60 seconds. One of the things that you can do when you're logged into PrimeGov, and you call up the packet for the general plan. This is the one from the Planning Commission last week. It has 4 chapters. It's 31 pages. You have this little button called Annotate. So if I scroll down here to some text, and I click on Annotate, I can use this, highlight this kind of the triangle with an exclamation point, and I can highlight the text that I want to come back and address it. I can also type text with the T, and I can come over here and say reword, or this is a date. I don't know how I picked date. Anyway, you can leave text. If there's some highlights that you would like to make, that you want to visit on that topic, you can save these, and then you're able to print it out as PDF, or you can use that to email it to us. But this may be a useful tool as you're going through a 197-page document. These highlights are specific to you on your login as you're going through I'll be done. As you're going through the general plan. So
You're terrible.
just a helpful 75-second comment.
And at the end of the day, and then what we'll do is we'll figure out how to get the comments that we can compile them into a list so that everybody can see those and share them.
Fair disclosure, I've got my own method of note taking, and where some of it is some of my notes are half formulated thoughts. I don't want to be throwing that out into something that could be perceived as a government record. So I've got my own process for notes. I'll not be going that route.
Whatever you do to note it, read it, and then and I'm sure Cassidy will figure out a way to collect the comments. Mr. Wall.
I'm not going to put a limit on my time. I just wanted, and I'm stepping a little bit out of my lane here, but I did see one city who went through this, use something pretty effectively. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but using Word and the comment features. All the council members reviewed the general plan. They put them in comments at the side, sent them to the city recorder, and it was a very easy thing using Word features to combine all of those into one document, and then they put it up on a great big screen.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't solve Council Member McConaughey's issue, but it was an easy way to compile everything and make it very clear to everyone for the discussion. And everybody knew that everybody had seen it all ahead of time, and so you could go through and say, well, I agree with these 30, there's only these 3 that I want to talk about. But that's just,
Well, I will tell you that we've got a super smart software, I don't know what she is, policy analyst that will be able to figure out how to consolidate our comments, I'm sure. So, we'll go that route. We'll do it, basically in one work session. Dedicate the time with a work session. We'll just come back with the comments already pre-done and pre-compiled so we can just jump into that discussion. Sounds like that's the way to go. The other thing I'm just going to throw in, since I'm the chair of the general plan committee, is we need to start planning the celebration dinner for the general plan committee. You know, they spent 2 years. They spent 2 years with this nonsense. The least that we can give them is a nice dinner. Corbin's laughing over there. But isn't that true, Corbin?
I'm just very glad to hear we're going to show our gratitude for their hard work. Yeah. Yep.
No, I think we have to. If we don't, that's just shame on us. So, any other comments? With that, we're finishing up work session by my clock, or the committee of the whole, 3 minutes early. And we'll, technically, because we're in the committee of the whole, I'm going to move to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting stands adjourned, and we'll call to order the city council meeting in 17 minutes.